out here at the bowling alley here at South Point Casino Hotel, Spas and Suites and Pools. Not only do they host our meetup games, but they also have a bowling alley. Not only do they have a bowling alley, but the prices are extremely affordable. It's probably been damn near 5 years or so since I've thrown a bowling ball down a lane. Not exactly super high expectations for myself stepping into the lane, the alley today. Good to get out of the poker room though, especially after a subpar session. It's one of the more frequently asked questions that I get via either the comments or direct messages. People frequently ask me, what do you recommend for getting over either a bad loss or a bad run, a handful of losses in a row, things like that. So there's generally two approaches that you can take when you're in this sort of a stretch. You can kind of break them down into two different categories. One would be tactics, and then the other one would be sort of general rules that you should be abiding by, whether you're in a bad stretch or you're not. So let's have a think about some tactics that you can use. Maybe you are off to a bad start in a session. Maybe you've been playing for 3 hours, and those first 3 hours have not gone well. You're in the hole. Maybe you're down a buy-in and a half. What should you do? You're not feeling super great at the moment. Maybe not quite tilted, but not feeling 100%. Tactics would be different things like getting up and taking a walk. Personally, that's my favorite thing to do. I'll just get up and I'll take a walk for maybe 15 or 20 minutes. Restroom, around the casino, maybe you get some fresh air. Fresh air can definitely help. Just get out of the environment, change your mindset up that way. Using that as an example, you can see how you could extrapolate that to literally anything that will change up your mindset and get you out of that environment. Go to a nearby restaurant, grab some food, go out to your car, listen to some music. Another thing that I like to do, and not for any superstitious reasons, but sometimes I will switch seats at the poker table. Again, it's not because I think that current seat that I'm in is unlucky. It's because it will help me get a new perspective on the game and sort of shift me from maybe thinking about it as a previous session into a new session, looking at things from literally a different angle. That will help me sometimes. Same thing, get a table change. Of course, you don't want to switch out of your table if that's a good one, but sometimes changing tables or at least changing seats can give you literally a new perspective. If you want to take a wider look amongst multiple sessions, avoid the casino for a little while. Not saying to take a super long break or anything like that, but enjoying the outdoors can definitely make a difference. Play some sports. Maybe you have a favorite sport. Maybe you get a session in of that. Maybe bowling is your thing. Again, all these different tactics, and you can think of endless different little unique or maybe not so unique tactics that you can do. Switch up your mindset. Let's talk about some general rules that you should be abiding by anyway, not just when you are in a rough stretch, not just when you're in a downswing or when you've had a bad session. You should be sharing hands with fellow poker players to make sure that you're not exacerbating the problem, the run bad problem. Hopefully those fellow poker players will be pros, or at the very least, winning players. If you don't have anyone, if you don't have a circle of friends, or you don't have any fellow pros that you can run some hands by to make sure that you aren't doing anything wrong, we have just a thing for that. We have what's known as the Hand History Lounge. You can grab yourself a free week. I'll put a link down below. If you don't want to pay for it, there are plenty of forums out there on the internet that are free where you can post hands. We'll get feedback from various players that you can take, and you can weigh their opinions, and you can see how you're doing based on your thought process and what they are saying about your thought process. Beyond that, the usual stuff. Don't play when you're burnt out. Don't play when you are low on sleep. Don't play hungover. Get exercise, and of course you want to be studying all the time. There's some stuff I'm starting to get back into. I'm trying some different lines you might have seen in the past couple of videos that are a little bit out of the norm. I'm hitting the books a little bit. I'm getting into the lab myself, so I'm looking to improve. Poker is going to be a lifelong learning process, and not just when you're running bad, although it's easy to sort of disregard those things when you're running good. Definitely want to keep doing those things when you're running bad. It's an appropriate topic for me at the moment. My last session was not a good one. It was a meetup game. It was mostly fun. We had an interesting twist at the end of the night to this meetup game, which I'll tell you guys about in a little bit. But I should have known things were going to be off to a rough start. When we look down at pocket aces, one of our very first hands we get dealt at the very first table, there's a bunch of limps. I make it 25 to go in late position, and we get no action. So always a sad sight. No action with the pocket aces. And very shortly after that, in fact, I believe the very next hand, I look down at ace deuce of diamonds, go ahead and raise it up to $20. And what do you know? We get 3-bet. One hand too late. We go from the best hand ever created to not a terrible hand. We have a suited wheel ace, but I don't think I should be calling all of my suited wheel aces to a 3-bet. Do some things with maybe ace 4 suited and ace 5 suited, but the worst of the suited wheel ace, I'm gonna let this one go.
Some alcohol, you know? has nothing to do with the casino, just the state game. Yes, that's the state.
In this next hand, we look down at another premium hand, ace king offsuit, make it $15 to go from under the gun. We see 3 callers, so we are heading 4 ways to a flop of 9-7 deuce with 2 diamonds. I've been incorporating a lot of c-bets into my lines lately. I'm continuing to experiment with some different things. Oftentimes I will just check down or try to get to showdown with my ace king. Has decent showdown value, but in this case, I go ahead and put a down bet, c-bet here on the flop. We see 1 caller, so we're going heads up to a good turn card. It's an offsuit king. This time I ramp it up to $105. My opponent thinks for a little bit and he calls. River's kind of interesting. It's the king of diamonds, so we make trips here with the best kicker on the river, but it completes the front door flush. I think I'm gonna go ahead and bet this, and I'm going to put it into my bet fold range here. I wouldn't expect my opponent to continue all that often with, say, an open-ended straight draw on the turn where there's a flush draw on the flop. So that means he's not gonna have too many bluffs in his range when we check it over to him here on the river. And if we're gonna check call, I feel like we should just be betting ourselves anyway. That way we try and get some value from some middling pairs, and he might be non-believing considering there's 2 kings on the board now instead of just the 1. So I'm gonna go ahead and bet here, $150. My opponent goes into the tank for a little while before deciding on a fold. So a little unfortunate there, we can't get any more value, but we will take this down. Immediately after that, we have a limped pot here, and I have jack 9. The flop comes queen, jack 9, so we flop ourselves 2 pair. I'm just gonna go ahead and lead right out. We see 1 caller in late position. Turn's not a good one for us. It counterfeits our 2 pair, so I check it over to him and he checks back. The river is a blank, I believe. I check it over to him again, trying to get to showdown, and he puts out a bet. Considering that we have some pairs and things blocked and we don't have any of the draws blocked, I'm gonna go ahead and call here. Not loving it exactly, considering the fact that we're up against a regular player. So I make the call and he shows us queen jack. So I guess it's not the worst ever result, considering the fact that we flopped 2 pair against a better 2 pair. In this next hand, the straddle is on, and once again, we look down at ace king offsuit. I go ahead and make it $35 to go, and only the straddler makes the call. He checks dark, so I decide to get a little bit frisky here, mix things up a little bit, and I bet $25 in the dark. The flop comes down 10-8 deuce, so we do whiff, but we should be beating some percentage, some decent percentage of hands still. However, my opponent does put in a check raise, makes it $75 to go. I think we want to continue here since we have down bet the flop. We can improve on an ace or a king, and that shouldn't be too much of a worry. The only typical hands that would improve on those cards would be ace 10 and king 10. We also don't block any of his potential draws, so I think we have a good hand candidate to continue with here. The turn is not a good card at all. It's an offsuit queen, so that will improve a lot of his drawing hands. He does check it over to me, but I don't see any good reason to bet here, so I check it back. The river is another queen, and he checks it over to us. Again, I don't think this is going to be a great card for us to turn a hand into a bluff on. A lot of draws miss, and the ones that don't probably would have bet on the turn. So I'm just going to check this back and take it to showdown, not expecting to win all that often. And sure enough, we get shown jack 10. Unless we go crazy and turn this hand into a bluff on both the turn and the river and bet some pretty big sizings, I don't think he's going to be folding that hand. Happy with my line, though. I think it's perfectly fine.
Heads up.
In this next hand, we look down at pocket 7s, go ahead and raise that up. The player on my left calls before the button puts in a 3-bet up to $80. Folds back over to me, didn't come all the way to the South Point Casino to be folding pocket pairs to 3-bets. I'm gonna go ahead and set mine here, look to find a favorable flop. The player on my left folds, so we go heads up to not a favorable flop. We whiff here. We do get to see all 5 cards as my opponent checks it down, and we do not improve on any of those 5 cards. My opponent goes ahead and shows me the pocket jacks that he 3-bet with and checked it down. So mostly standard there. I think we are getting decent implied odds there. We're not super deep, but I think the implied odds were certainly there to go ahead and set mine with the 7s, but maybe a standard hand. One of many hands, though, in the evening that we do not connect with. Whiff City. Population, this guy. Speaking of Whiff City, here's another hand where we go ahead and 3-bet with the ace queen of clubs. We do not improve. Our opponent does improve with the ace 3 offsuit. That's gonna win himself a pot. So things are starting to shape up here at the meetup game. In this next hand, the straddle is on once again. There's an early position player who makes $35 to go. We looked down at king 10 of clubs, and I think we could go one of 2 ways here. We could flat call or we could 3-bet. I think flatting is certainly fine, especially versus an early position player, but I think 3-betting is also perfectly fine. Reason for that is that we take control of the pot. Sometimes he'll fold and we win pre-flop. We knock the blinds and the straddler out of the hand, and If we happen to get 4-bet, it's not the worst situation in the world. It's king 10, so we won't be too sad. I'm gonna go ahead and 3-bet this one and make it $115 to go. Only the initial raiser makes the call. So we are going heads up to a flop, which comes ace 9-3 with 2 spades. He checks it over to me, and considering that we don't have a whole lot of equity here, I certainly think a check back is reasonable. I honestly can't remember if there was a club on the board or not. If there is a club on the board, I think a c-bet is maybe standard. If there is no club on the board, I think maybe a check is standard. But I think an ace-high flop will favor us a decent percentage of the time, considering he did not put in a 4-bet. We have a king in our hand, so that blocks ace-king. And I think if we want to take this to the streets, go ahead and barrel all 3 streets, then a c-bet is going to be perfectly fine. Not saying this is a good candidate to do that, considering we have basically zero equity versus a calling range. But anyway, I go ahead and c-bet here, down bet once again, $75. My opponent makes the call. Not a good sign when you just have king high on an ace-high board. The turn is a deuce of hearts, and he checks it over to me again, and I get a little bit of a read on him. I pick up a little bit of a tell. It seems like he's got himself a strong hand here, so I just go ahead and shut down and give up. We make a pair on the river, but the front door flush draw comes in. It's the 10 of spades. To make things worse, he puts out a bet of $225, so can't call here. Considering that there was no draw other than that front door flush draw on the flop, just pretty standard fold in this situation. And after I do so, he shows us pocket 9s. So again, a couple of things to think about there, I guess. If he has 9s there, he's gonna have 8s, 7s, maybe 6s, maybe even lower. 10s, maybe jacks, things of that nature. He's usually not going to flop a set. C-bet, even a small one, is usually going to take it down there on the ace-high flop versus a lot of players. Even if he does continue on the flop and we pick up a different read, maybe we can consider go ahead and barreling away. In this instance, we lose the $75 on the flop there, and happy that I shut it down there after that. In this next hand, we look down at ace queen of diamonds, 40% of a royal flush. Go ahead and make it $20 to go. There's a caller in middle position before a late position player puts in another 3-bet. $75 this time. I'm not looking to fold ace queen, looking to start making some hands here. I think we're due. I go ahead and make the call, and the player on my left calls as well. So 3 ways to a worthless flop of 5 deuce deuce. We check to the 3-better, who continues for a c-bet to the mere tune, the small dollar amount of $800. He goes ahead and rips his stack in there for $800. I don't think we have too much of a decision here. I'm just gonna go ahead and lay down my ace queen. Player on my left folds. We do not get to see what was probably almost certainly a hand like pocket jacks. I'm gonna go ahead and guess maybe pocket kings. You never know. It's a game of incomplete information, this poker thing. So yeah, not exactly the session of dreams. Could have taken a couple different lines, could have played better, especially towards the end of the session when I was for sure maybe about it, on tilt a little bit, trying to make some things happen here in the meetup game. I do give a little bit of action, a little bit to a lot of action, especially in this last hand where I played at 5 deuce to a raise, 5 deuce suited. It was the last hand of the night. The caller is at 5 deuce suited. As you can see, we're off the rails now completely. I do like to mix it up in the meetup games, as I said. I like to give action. I try to make the games fun where I can, but turns out to be very ill-advised play here, especially when I end up losing somewhere around $300 in this hand, bluffing with a pair of 5s on a 4 straight board, and we get called down by king jack suited. So maybe you guys can see why I was due for a night off away from the tables. Came out here, throw some balls at some pins. Got into the 2-5 meetup games here at the South Point for, I want to say $1,800. Cashed out a lot less. Cashed out something like 3 something. Happy to provide for a little bit of action in the meetup games. I feel like it's kind of my responsibility to not knit it up when I'm playing the meetup games. I definitely did that. I definitely provided some action, but you know, maybe it could have cost me a little bit less. I got a little bit of free pizza, so that was always nice. And not only that, but we got some free comedy as well. We enjoyed the comedy stylings of Ben Ludlow. Ben's a poker player, and he's also a stand-up comedian. He came by, he graced us with his presence at the meetup game with a 15-minute set after the meetup game was over at the lounge right next to the poker room.
No, it's really good to be here. I'm a little disappointed. The only reason I agreed to do this, Andrew said he'd introduce me to Johnny Vibes, but I don't see him anywhere, so I guess that's a later thing.
So I want to say thanks to Ben for performing here at the meetup game. It was cool to do something different at the meetup games rather than just poker, just hanging out at the poker tables. We do step away from the tables and go hang out at the bar usually, but to have an actual entertainer, a professional entertainer, we definitely want to try and be more creative and do different things of that nature, whether that's after the game or in the game. As for my my bowling game, my first game played in at least 5 years. What did I bowl, like 137 or something? Hey, I'm just happy to have broken 100. This is a pretty cool spot. We could definitely come up here following a meetup game here at the South Point. There's a bar over there. Maybe we can even do some wagering and maybe I can lose some more money to you guys at a meetup game.